Welcome, everybody, to the show. Not joining us this evening is our regular co host, Dan the Dan Noodles Man. He's got some affairs he's got to take care of this evening. Are we muted? But apparently not. So, our very special guest this evening is Mr. Meandering Mike. Mike, thanks for joining us. And anybody who's not aware, Mike also has a YouTube channel. I will throw the link into the chat. He had a video pretty recently and has done a number of videos about organizing one's stuff. So I figured this would be a fantastic topic to talk about, and particularly since Dan is not here to talk about his toilet. So, Mike, I understand you're in the middle of a reorganizing project right now, and we'll talk about that. But in the meantime, how many kinds of games are you managing at home? Because I know your collection is substantial.
So yes, I people talk about an omni gamer, and I think of myself that way, not in the sense of all games, but pretty much darn any kind of game I enjoy. Some I emphasize more than others. So we're talking classic war games, we're talking new hybrid Euro games, typical Euro games, card games, miniatures games. Yeah, you name it. Even the occasional old school classic board game like Monopoly and Go for Broke and things like that. So yeah, I even have a few.
I've never played Go for Broke, to be fair.
It was fun because the whole idea was to lose $1 billion. So
okay, that's fair. So it's Brewster's Billions, the board game. I could deal with that. So I'm just kind of tracking war games and RPGs. I mean, my non-war games, I've got a smallish shelf of family type games. And I've got a smallish type shelf with, not that small, 6 or maybe 7 Euro-y, pretty heavy Euro-y type games. But other than that, it's all war games and RPGs. I don't count the miniatures because I still have some miniature stuff, but they're just packed in a desk over here, and I haven't touched them in a long time. So,
yeah. So if you want, I can go into the story of my relationship with games and how it's come and gone. If you
sure
would like to do that,
I think everybody has a story like this. Let's hear yours.
It's a medium length tale, but it's interesting somewhat. So, like most people, I got started with typical family type board games, and that eventually evolved into like Milton Bradley, Tank Battle, and Chopper Strike, things like that. So war themed, but not war games. But I got involved with war games when I bought my first one, like when I was 12 years old. SPI's Panzer 44. It was crazy, insanely difficult. I had to read the rules 3 times before I could understand it, but I actually figured it out at 12 years old. It was, it's got plotted orders and simultaneous move and all that kind of crazy stuff. So I dove into the deep end and then just kept going with, Avalon Hill, got into role-playing games. And so throughout the 70s and into the 80s, I would play almost anything with my gaming friends. I personally only owned a few dozen titles. And so my first start with organization was my dad had a wooden trunk from the Air Force, a moving crate.
Mm-hmm.
Not one of the foot lockers that are metal, but it was a big moving crate. And he went and he took that, turned it on its side, and put a shelf in it and said, "Here you go." So that was my war game, other game cabinet that could only have a certain amount. And at some point, it was starting to overflow. And so that was a stage in my life where I actually got rid of some games, And of course, when I got rid of games, it was just given to the Goodwill, right? There's no thought back then of selling games to anything of that, no kind of marketplace in games and that. And so eventually, I started whittling that down as I got older, and I kept 12 games, just my 12 sort of favorite games at that point that I didn't want to get rid of, and I kept them in a box. Back in the early computer days, when you bought a multimedia kit to get a CD-ROM and a sound card because your computer didn't have them, and so it was this, big kind of crate with the handle on the top, not crate, but cardboard thing, and I had 12 games left in that. And that's what I had for years. Basically, when I got married, I got rid of, all my games, including at some point started getting to my computer games. I computer gamed mostly the 90s. I got rid of everything else. And so for the longest time, I was not involved with games at all. And so now a little aside, my early plans were to teach history using Wargames. When I went to college, I was going to study history and the classics. The very first quarter, I studied ancient Greek. I took a senior history level course and I took calculus. And I was an A student in high school. But in college hit, and suddenly, bam, I'm getting C's in Greek and the senior level history, but I got an A in calculus. But I was like, oh, this is too much work. And they want you to write papers and stuff like that. And so I kept taking some history, but I ended up switching to become an econ major. But still in the back of my mind, I had this thought that I would love to someday teach through Wargames. And so I kept learning more history and learning geography, because I learned a ton of geography from the games, which most Americans, don't know diddly about geography, right? And you can learn so much from the game. So fast forwarding, did I do anything with my economics degree? No, not really. I became a computer programmer, database work, client server applications, a whole bunch of different things, eventually getting into business intelligence. And finally, I started thinking, like, I'm getting closer and closer to when I might want to retire. And what do I want to do? I want to go back and maybe do game design, because I did that a little bit in the 80s. We can talk about that later if you want to or not, but that could be a topic for another day. But I wanted to dabble in it again. And I could go back to Visual Basic and I did some game programming in the 90s, working on a shareware title that never hit the market. But I said, I'm going to start learning about game programming again. I started taking some courses online. And one of the things that they emphasized was learn to design first by building board games, board game prototypes, prototype with paper and cardboard and pencil and pens and all that stuff. So I got back into it, and this was in 2017, and I got bit by the bug. And so I wanted to reacquire every single game that I had had before, and every single game that I'd played, and every single game that I saw that my friends had that I liked, and I kept going from there. And so from 2017 to now, I started with my 12 games in my box, and now, as I keep saying, people, I lost count somewhere over 4,000. I mean, you can look it up on Geek, and it'll tell you the true total of what I think I've logged all of my actual games in there. But of course, I keep finding ones that, oh wait, this isn't in there. But yeah, I won't say how many it is. It's too many. So
here's a great question. What in those 12 games that you didn't dump, what were they?
So some of them were games that I put together in the same box, the same space. So I have a copy of SPI's A Mighty Fortress and Empire of the Middle Ages together in one box. And then I had a copy of Spitzer's European Theater of Operations and Pacific Operations together in one box. I have a copy of the Tales of the Arabian Nights from West Point Games. I had a couple of S&T games. One was my Battle for Germany, and complete with the counters that I had to make, because I lost 2 counters over the course of the years. Unfortunately, some of the things that I had at one point that I got rid of there's game prototypes that I'd made, games for high school projects and other things. I ran 2 play-by-mail games, and I only have stuff from one of them really, and not all the stuff. But so there are things that I lost or misplaced over the years that I wish I still had some of these prototypes. I've got a lot of the maps for most of the games that I worked on, but not all of them. But the rules and the counters and stuff, I sort of made a clone of GDW's Imperium, where I took it and made some modifications from Starfire and from Freedom in the Galaxy, and I had a space game, and I took the flavor of Avalon Hill's Blitzkrieg in terms of the maps, but I turned it into a beach invasion game, which I called Invasion! Things like that. I had created a version of Conquistador that I called Exploration! where I had made up my own map and I had 3 friends. They were doing, blind, exploring my alternate world and each, doing their own maps and things like that. So I wish I'd had, some modified rules, and I lost all that stuff. But
Yeah, I went through, I don't want to say a similar journey necessarily, but a parallel journey, right? Where I never really got out of gaming, but there have been times in my life where I didn't really have time to do gaming, right? There's other things were going on, like when I went back to school in 2005, for example. Was it 2005 or was it I don't know, something like that. There was between that and a full-time job, there was no time for games. So I kind of kept paying attention, but wasn't really buying anything. And at that point, I still had like a lot of RPG stuff, but I had gotten rid of most war games. I too hung on to maybe a dozen titles. It wasn't quite that organized about it, but those included things from Avalon Hill and GMT, among others. But all the SPI stuff went away, for example. And I had some stuff that at the time, that nowadays might go for decent change, but nothing maybe breathtaking. And I too have embarked on a rebuying spree of various things that I had at one point that I now have decided I do in fact want to be buried with.
So besides, mentioning I wanted to get everything that I had, or that I played but didn't have, or had seen that I'd liked, because I was also studying, game design sort of as a hobby or something to do when I retire, I got into the notion of comparative game design. So that's when it really took off, when I started buying almost anything where it's like, oh, well, I need to learn about deck builders, and I need to learn about worker placement, and all these different kind of thing, and different, chit pools and card driven games. So things that I hadn't seen yet, that hadn't come out yet. It's like, well, I got to go deeper and deeper and deeper. And so some of the crazy stuff that I buy is because I watch shows like, Ardwulf's Lair and No Enemies Here and the War Room and stuff. And it cost me so much money hearing about all these games.
I accept zero responsibility for this irresponsibility on your part.
And you wouldn't realize how many times in the middle of a show, someone's talking about things, and bam, 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 I'm filling up a cart on Noble Knight Games, and I hit that magical $149 or more to get, the free shipping, and boom, so like I say, I order every month from Noble Knight Games, but sometimes it's every week. And occasionally it's been more than one order a week.
I don't even order that much, and they're a show sponsor.
Yeah. So it's scary. Now, interesting, I'm seeing some comments here. I want to quickly address something. Have I played 4,000 games? Absolutely not. So of the games that I have out there, I have played to one extent or another, maybe 10 to 20% of them. And there's maybe another 20-ish% of games that I have studied. Again, that's from a historical, geographical, or comparative game design purposes. So there's a huge number that I've never had a chance to actually look at, but want to.
I understand. I've bought games for that reason too, to say, I'd really like to get a copy of SPI's Cedar Mountain, because I had it back in the day and I got rid of it, and I have the new Cedar Mountain now, and I could do like a compare and contrast there. That would be great. That is a video I thought of like 10 years ago. Well, and there's still no such video on this channel.
That's one of the things, I've heard you say and other people say, well, I don't need more than one game on a topic. And sometimes people say, well, maybe 2 games because I like this designer and that one. But too often for me, and it's not just games, it's like I go down a rabbit hole and it's like, oh, well, here's the designer. I want to get everything that they have, or everything on this topic, or everything by this company. And I do the same thing with books, CDs, DVDs. I hit a topic, and the completist in me is very strong. It's that force, that acquisitive force is strong in this one. And I go into the dark side of that, and I go too far. Yeah. So
I get it. So how do you keep all this stuff organized? Christoph mentions Excel, which is what I use, but I've got 650, a little less than 650 Not
Well,
counting any pending departures that might conceivably occur. But I mean, and I feel like that's a lot. I have trouble not necessarily knowing where a particular game is because I have a system, right? But I just finding a place for all the different things.
so I have this relationship with Excel where I hate it because I have been a programmer. I've had to deal with many imports of data, and it's the
Mm.
worst thing in the world to have to deal with spreadsheets that users do who knows what to in this format and that format. And oops, they formatted these, item codes as a number because it's a number, except they have leading zeros, which are critical and important, and things get rounded off and things like that. So I hate spreadsheets. Do I use them if I have to? Yes. Now, I'm a database programmer. You think I would program everything? No, I unless I absolutely have to, I don't want to create my own collection database. So thank goodness for BGG. As much as some people don't like certain aspects of BGG, I'm on BGG every day because it is the absolute best way for me to keep track of my collection. So I use it to research games, find games, keep track of my games. I got pissed off at publishers who put out games and it's not on BGG yet. You are doing yourself a disservice. You are not selling as many games as you could if you do not have your BGG up to date. Little service announcement there. If you're listening out there, publishers, be up to date. Thank you. Avalanche Press, you're one of the culprits.
Yeah, doesn't seem to be a priority for very many publishers in wargaming anyway. And I don't know if that means Consum World is sucking up all the oxygen in that particular room or what. But my sense is that many wargame publishers are just not really paying much attention to BGG.
Some do.
Some do.
And
Some do.
Too many don't.
Mm-hmm.
So organizationally, so someone had asked up there in the comments also about how to get started on my channel.
Yeah, I have that flagged for
and
future
the very
asking.
first, I had been talking about wanting to start a channel because one of the things I wanted to do was do videos on old games that I liked, that explaining how to play them and the strategy and tactics. And occasionally I would see a video out there that someone was playing it wrong, and it really tweaks my seeing someone teaching people how to do something wrong. Okay, so that was the first desire. But when I actually started doing it, it was because I was moving and I had to move all my games, and I was showing what I had, how I had to pack it up, start bringing things into the man cave. So the early videos were, oh, here's these 2 or 3 shelves and these piles of stuff. And then somewhere along the line, I stopped doing that because it was getting crazier, and I had to focus on getting everything moved and done. And so every so often now I'll do an organizational video. We'll all figure out some way, like, oh, I want to store these supplies, miniatures, paint things, or whatever, and I'll take boxes and I'll put pictures on them, and how to organize things. And then I'll occasionally have things on the bookshelves and things, like my Napoleonic game and book nook, and how I every little bit of space, how to put something in there. And of course my latest one is my Stairway of Shame.
Yeah, I saw that. The pre-picture, I got to tell you, made my anus twitch. I was like,
so you need to watch the video.
I did. I watched the last one anyway.
Because about 2/3 of the way through, we're talking about doing, and something I pan over, and oh shit, there's all this stuff up the other side of the stairs too. So it's the Stairway of Shame.
But I like the solution too, where you like stagger the bookcases up all the way up. That's actually pretty clever idea, I thought.
I had seen like maybe 1 or 2 videos on YouTube about shelves on bookcases, and it was like these custom built, the carpenters doing stuff. And one was a really crazy thing where like the books are like under the shelves or something weird. And then this other one, this guy put in these bookcases basically for all his wife's romance novels. But I don't want to build something. And I searched and searched and searched, and I lucked out finding these things that were just the right width, that I could get them so that they would fit exactly every 2 shelves. Now, I'll tell you, I measured that and I figured out the right thing. And my plan was to put them on the other wall underneath the railing. It's like, these are going to fit, except I didn't quite measure right. And it's like the downhill angle would about a 2-inch diagonal, 1.5 inch up would have not been able to fit underneath the handrail. It's like, it's all, you know, that, you know, stair steppy part. It's like, shit, I can't put it on that side. I wanted to put it under the handrail because you already have some, you know, sort of space taken up there. I thought this would be great. So I had to put it on the other side. So that's a work in progress. Like I said in the video, I only want to do about 1 or 2 new bookcases into that a day because, you know, you have to assemble it. You're bending over and you're pounding the back in and moving it over and cramming it in. Just like, you know, again, it's like that perfect width, but you got to push it in, you know, sort of like compress the carpet where it comes over the corner of the stairs and it comes in perfectly. So every day or 2 or 3, I'll do one more. So I got like 5 or 6 more of those to put in, and then I'll be done. But then, of course, then there's all the stuff on the other side. What do I do with that? So.
Yeah, well, I mean, you'll be the tops are perfectly valid locations too, right? You get a whole extra shelf out of each unit.
So that's now one of the things. Those aren't very deep. Those are just like 9 inches or 9.3 or something like that deep. So you can't put, you know, a 12 by 12 box, which many tabletop board games are. That's a very standard, so perfect for putting into your 13 by 13 Kallax. But you know, GMT games fit size on. There's 5 shelves, right? There's 2 small ones that are great for paperbacks or small form games. Now, compass games happen to be just a little bit wider, so they stick out like 1/8 of an inch past the edge, which is okay. But in some ways, it's like that, you know, gets my OCD. So it's like, nah, we're not going to put compass here. So on the tops, I could put sideways bigger games, sort of like as a display.
Right.
So that's one thing if you want to show off some things. Or if you notice the one part where I had the cardboard magazine holders, so those fit there. So you could have 4 or 5 of those on a shelf, and so that I could put a ton of, you know, magazines and things like that. The problem with those is for magazine games that you've actually punched out. That wreaks havoc on your tidiness and fitting those things in. Other than using trays. And so that's why I want to give a plug for the Aegis magazine trays. Now let's see, that's in the other room. I could have showed that's one of the things. How do you store your magazine games? And I have had 3 different solutions. So one now is these magazine trays, and the advantage of those is for your better, more valuable games you want to play more often, you can see the front cover. You can put it in there on the side to store it. You can use like a label maker to put under the clear top, but against the tray. So you can have a label so that you can see what it is. Those are great. But if you need to store them more in mass, there's, you know, the magazine holders, which again, if you have, I got a ton of these, you know, World at War or Modern War or, you know, S&T of the Decision Games era, which I've played very few. You know, I've played like almost all the S&T of the SPI era games. But once they're punched out, you got to figure out a way to not have the big bulge of the baggie of the counters, and then you're trying to stick those in there, and the thing does. So one method is a hanging file folder. So I bought these portable boxes. So instead of like in a file cabinet, I've got these portable boxes. They're black, and you fold them up and they snap together. However, they're not that sturdy. So like if you just had a few sheets of paper in each file folder, that'd be fine. But heavy magazines get heavy, especially the more modern the paper, right? So the early S&Ts, they can fit in there. And because the file folder, you know, bulges a little bit, you can have room for the stuff. But, you know, if they all have their counters in there, like sometimes I try like, well, I'm going to put the baggie vertically here and put one here, 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 here as I go through the thing sometimes. But those file folder things, I found if you take bulldog clips and you put them on the corners where it snaps together, it holds it enough to give it this this stability where it's not going to bulge out and potentially fall apart. So I actually have about 6 or 7 of those for large runs of strategy and tactics magazines, are in those. They're black, portable, foldable, and they actually have handles on them, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's a file.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Actually, so plastic or cardboard?
It is cardboard with like a textured vinyl covering. So it's
okay.
It seems quite sturdy, except the fact that it just button snaps together.
Mm-hmm.
So too much shit, like you drop it or you push it, it's going to spill open and come apart at the button seams. And so those bulldog clips just work perfectly. I can't remember where. I think it was somewhere on YouTube that I saw someone talking about this.
That's a clever idea. I've always I have, at least according to my spreadsheet, I have 89 magazine games, which I feel like is a lot of magazine games. And I have no intention of getting rid of the majority of them because I bought them for a reason, although there's probably a couple. I haven't even gone through this yet. But I've tended to like rebox. So I buy those mailers. I've got a cat on my lap, but I'm not going to get up and reach for one right now. But there is one right here. Those like literature mailers that are roughly 8.5 by 11, or maybe they're like 9 by 11.5 or something like that. They're roughly the size of a traditional Wargame bookcase box.
Yeah.
But they're a little bigger. But I can get 2 counter trays and 4 magazine games, assuming everything is like the regular size and not like some monster ATO thing that they might have done. I can usually get 4 magazine games in roughly the same like amount of shelf space as a regular 2-inch Wargame box. I think probably a little bit bigger, but not by much. But I mean, I've still got 30 or 40 magazine games that I haven't bothered to do that with too. So,
and that approach is really good when you have a series of games that go together. So, it's like, oh, there was these 4, games in the S&T series with the Mediterranean stuff. I can't remember
the Italian campaign. Yep. Yes. No, yeah. I've got the whole series boxed that exact and punched and neatly organized exactly that way.
And so
same with Victory in the West.
There's a fair number, and it's sometimes I could see putting, the magazine games of the fifth wheels of the quads in with the game. The problem is my completist niche. I want to have them. So often I have a second copy where I'll put, Tannenberg in with the Great War in the East quad box, and then I have Tannenberg with my magazines also. So, that's OCD collector man kind of level stuff.
I'd say so, but Dave's asking for a link to my mailers, but I don't have it handy. I'll see if I can dig it up while Mike's going here, because you could always dig it out of your Amazon history, right? So do you like organize then by like, I find myself driven to like have everything neat on the shelves like you see behind me, right? Sitting on the shelves properly. I don't like horizontal things on the shelves. On top, cool, I'll do that. But I don't have that much that would qualify for that. But do you like organize by company or by box size?
Yes, both. All.
Okay.
I have, and especially because of the huge amount of stuff that I have, that things are still in, some of them are still in those blue totes. So there's a picture that I put in the latest video that showed the part of, parts are not organized or accessible. And there's these blue totes. Those are packing totes that I use, that I created a cardboard box or just a tube, like a U, to help protect the games that I, moved like 90% of the games in those blue totes, and I still have a bunch of them out there. And so sometimes if something hasn't come out of those, like trying to find, like, taking a week, like where the heck is my Case Blue, right? It literally took me almost a full week to find my copy of Case Blue when I was looking for it.
Oh my.
And so some things is I get them out and find them and say, okay, I can organize these. I think I have everything from this company. And sometimes, I've got them all but one. Dang, where's that one thing, right? So sometimes I don't come up with a permanent place for something until I have them all, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'll start like, well, right now I got all my Hollenspiele titles here on these bookcases with that hex number out on the spine. You know, it's an OCD thing. I got it. They all got to be in order. And so those I don't order by designer. I don't order by the genre, the historical period or category of game. Those are by publisher order number, right?
Mm-hmm.
Have to do it that way. Whereas everything else Napoleonic is over in the Napoleonic book and game nook. Well, except not. Victory Point games are over there. I've got these. A lot of Victory Point games are, in the Ziploc bags or the small pizza boxes. So I have these 2 narrow bookcases that are just loaded with those. But then there's the bigger pizza box ones, and so those are in a calyx next to that, including the Napoleon ones.
Mm-hmm.
So I've got a white box that I got from like GMT, I think maybe it was from Noble Knight Games. But I put all the Napoleonic Ziplocs of Napoleon 20, and then there's the box Napoleon 20s. Right now, they're over there instead of in the nook. So I have to fight the internal battle. Do they move over to Napoleon, and then the VPGs are split up? Or can I move the VPGs over there too, so they're next to, crazy stuff like that. So,
I ran into similar struggles with things like that have been historically produced by different publishers, right? Like Great Campaigns of the American Civil War started out with Avalon Hill, now it's with MMP. There are other examples, or with Clash of Arms, which for a while seemed like every game they produced was in a different size box than every other game they had ever produced.
Yeah, so
they appear to have standardized to some extent now. But what I ended up doing was saying that I have a short list of priority series, right? This is the list of priority series. Great Battles of History, Der Weltkrieg, Great Campaigns and Great Battles of the American Civil War, both of them. OCS, BCS, and La Bataille. And those are sorted by series. Everything else I sort by publisher pretty much, because publishers usually publish everything in roughly the same size box. Although there's some wiggle room if printers get changed or whatever. And even GMT has done a couple oddball big flat boxes, Europe and Asia and Gulf. I don't have those, but I've got Avalon Hill flats up here, plus SPI flats. And then you got to think about SPI flats. Do you have the secret sauce for storing SPI flats without screwing them up? Because I don't, and neither does anybody else.
They're in bankers boxes, which is a long-term storage and moving solution. That's why I move them, because they just exactly fit in there. When you get them out, you got to sort of gently put your finger in there. You got to bow the box out a little bit and try not to damage them, and you can get in them, but that's not a solution to get at them regularly. Now, so like you were talking about, I try to sort by publisher, especially if a publisher does put them all in the same box size. Very convenient. And then if they do have some occasional oddball ones, I have to figure out where to fit them and put them, right? Sometimes I go by designer, though. So it's like I got all my Lou Pulsifer stuff up on the top of this bookcase and on the top of this hutch, right? And then in the hutch, Richard Berg. It's like a shrine to Richard Berg, but it spills over and there's some adjacent, well, Richard Berg worked on this, but then he didn't work on this, but it's part of that series. Or I can fit some more Civil War stuff next to the Richard Berg Civil War stuff. So like you say, like, well, there's the great battles of the American Civil War or the great campaigns, but those MMP ones though, I don't put they're on the other side, because I've got all my TCS and OCS and BCS and the international ones. Now, a lot of the MMP is off still in stores. Many of the international ones and other stuff are somewhere down there in the garage in those blue totes. But the main series, including the new Battles of the American Civil War, those are sort of together in this bookcase, and I have them there. So I've got rules that are light that vary. Sometimes it's by publisher, sometimes it's by designer, sometimes it's by chronology. So whenever I can, I will try to sort by chronology within anything else. unless if I'm sort of like my Napoleon, it's like Napoleon, and then try to go by publisher and box size, and then within that chronology.
Mm-hmm.
So I
I forgot one. The Library of Napoleonic Battles, which I organize chronologically and not by volume number, which makes some people go badly.
Have my volume number, and it pisses me off that the correct side of the box that you'd normally put out is in French.
I kind of like that, to be completely honest.
Backwards to have the English coming out. So, and I'm out like I said, my Napoleon part that is so open to changes. Like, I'll come back in a year, you're like, wow, it might be really different, and definitely, I've got stuff near there that I can take out. Like, what's this Rum and Bones pirate miniature game that can get out of there, and I can put in like, well, let's put Victory Point Games over here or something and get those Napoleonic 20 and other stuff like that. So it is an ongoing thing, and as I find the completeness, I get to the point where I want to figure out where this home is for things. And too often it's like, well, dang, I'm gonna have to move all this and that and rearrange things.
Oh yeah.
And so I can make someone asked about gameplay versus organization, and it goes back and forth. So I've made commitments to my channel to play certain thing, like for the War Room 10 games of the year. There's stuff I want to play for fun. I try to share a variety of things, which of course is bad for the algorithm. YouTube doesn't like channels that are very eclectic.
Supposedly.
Don't know how to market it very well. And so, my poor guys that like miniatures, they get shortchanged because I had to stop doing as much miniature stuff because it was actually hurting my channel numbers. But to some degree, it's like I don't care, and to some degree I do. It's just a weird thing. It's like I'm not doing this for the money, right? There is no money. I just keep paying money on stuff.
We too are a net money losing operation here at Ardwulf's Lair.
Well, you have an extra source of income from the support from people that help you do things that keeps a positive cycle of channel content. You can go
and it helps a lot
to conventions and things like that and get more games to cover and stuff like that. So that's I would love someday to make enough on the channel to go to a convention, right? Maybe that's the goal.
Wow, that's not a bad goal. There's a local convention. For me, but I'm sure you have a local convention too.
Yeah. Now I've got out of the habit of going anywhere because of the pandemic. I don't like to say the C word because you never know how YouTube swings that. But
we have stretched the YouTube user licensing agreement to its limits here on this show historically.
Yes, at different times it's so yeah, I'm trying to keep an eye here on the comments to see if there's anything else that I can add anything to. If people have any specific questions, if you've asked a question but I haven't answered it yet, or already hasn't asked it for you, go ahead and feel free to repeat a question.
Sure, I don't mind. So I got one in the meantime. Are you finding that it is becoming more difficult to do this as you acquire more games, not just because it's extra space being consumed, but because you're exposing yourself to a larger variety of box sizes?
Well, okay, before I answer that in specific, let me take a step back and say that organization of games is a luxury when
it is.
Your collection is small. If you have, a dozen, 2 dozen, 3 dozen, 4 dozen titles, you can see them all at once. You can put them on one bookcase or a set of shelves or whatever. And no matter what you do, no matter how you decide you want to organize it, you can see it all. And so however you do that, you could just throw them in at random and you're fine. You will be able to find them. But when you start getting so many that you can't find what you want when you want it, then it's no longer a luxury. It's like, oh my God, I have to do something about this. And most people make the good, smart decision to slow down their purchases or maybe get rid of some games. But I'm not smart that way,
I have some sympathy for that, though, right? Because I have repeatedly rebought stuff, right? Excuse me. I think I'm up to a third copy on at least one war game, and I've done that with RPGs repeatedly. Sometimes multiple repeats, right? So I get, and my wife has said, "Don't sell games. Don't sell games because you're just going to rebuy it," and I hate that, and I hate that too. And invariably, well, often I end up buying it for more than I paid for it originally, and definitely more than I got out of it at the time. Because a lot of times in the past, if I was in my 20s or something like that, I would sell games to buy this new thing that I wanted, right? So it was like I'd trade in 6 games and walk away with 1 game. And that is a net loser of a methodology. So I am reluctant at this point to sell games. That's why I've got a table of games that is in my way, and I walk past it every day to remind myself that these are games I'm thinking of getting rid of, and I've already backed off on a couple. I'm like, nah, we'll keep this one. We'll keep these couple in the series where I kept some of the games in the series. So I get not wanting to dump games. That is
I have
understandable.
given games away on my channel, and
many times, in fact.
Yeah, and usually though they're almost all ones that I have duplicates of, and that's either accidentally buying too much. What happens if sometimes I haven't put something in Board Game Geek and oops, I buy another one, or I don't realize that I've ordered this one and then I order it again before the first one shows up, so it's not in Board Game Geek. It's like I know I want that, and I don't remember, did I order it or not? I don't. So I'll give those away. I have sold only like 1 or 2 games, and it's been ones that I had multiple of. And I like if someone was looking for a game and I've got one that I can get to at a reasonable price. I don't want to get in the business of selling games to try to turn a profit.
Right.
That's just that's
that makes a mess of your taxes too.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And well, I have a ton of comic books. I have a huge comic collection. I need to get rid of them. I need to get rid of at least 50%, if not 70% of them. And the fact that I have no way to say how much it cost me, my basis as an investment, I can't prove anything. And so it's going to be all net income. And that sucks. So, so that's why one of the reasons I haven't actually got around to doing it. But that would help increase space. I used to have a storage unit, but that was way down away, and we moved way north from there, more than an hour away. And so I had to clear out the storage unit. We decided, well, let's cram them in here. I've got this huge garage, and oh my God, now it's just so packed, crazy tight.
At the old house, I had a substantial chunk of my games to the end in a storage unit, and I was very relieved to no longer have to pay for that storage unit, because it was like $120 a month or something. Like, that's a lot of money.
Yes, they went up. It was used to be so low, and then boom, 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 boom. And especially in an area where if you're not way out rural, those real estate prices just keep going up. The value of that land and that cost of the storage unit goes up. I want to go back and ask a question here. Christoph asked about my Grail game.
Yeah, I have 2 ways. You could let me ask it, because I'm going to ask it 2 different ways. Do you have a game that you are like exceptionally pleased to own? Like wow, I'm so lucky to have had this, or this is my dead favorite game, or this is the Holy Grail of Richard Berg right there, or something like that in your collection. And also, is there a Grail game that you do not yet have?
All right, so there have been many Grail games in terms of the quest, the acquisition, something that I don't have that eventually I get. So Le Grand Guerre, have I played it since I got it? No.
Me neither.
But I hunted and searched for it for a price that was reasonable. And I ended up, it wasn't really that reasonable. I had to order it from somebody in Belgium, and the shipping alone was like 50 euros and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, sometimes you spend too much. But that, again, the hunt, the collection, the acquisition, I'm such a stupid collector on so many different things that so getting Le Grand Guerre. Now, some of these things that I got before prices went crazy, I got my campaign for North Africa.
Good move.
$250. And I got my Case Blue when it was under $300. But
today it is not.
no. Well, the thing is, Case Blue needs to go down. The last I checked, they had 4 copies over $1,000. That obviously means it's priced too high. If they have 4 copies and they're not moving. So anyway, little editorial there about Noble Knight pricing sometimes. Now, some of the games that I have that I cherish because they're unique is the 2 prototypes that I have. One is a prototype of Fortress Europa.
Ooh.
That has Alan R. Moon was acting as a developer. They had the original Jedco copy is what I have with typed rules, changes, the notation where they were expanding part of the map and all this stuff. So there's like history in there of game development that, ooh, here's this cool prototype of Fortress Europa. Another one is a Brian Train prototype of his Ukrainian Crisis that ended up getting published by Hollandspiele along with a second to like the Little War or something, but that Ukrainian Crisis, he was originally having it with Victory Point Games with Alan Emmerich. And I have like basically what is a production proof copy. It's actually, went to a printer to be printed. It's not hand drawn, but Brian Train had removed it from there because I didn't get all the details from him, and he was surprised that it even existed in this form. But Alan was famous for 2 things that are quirky in my mind, and one of them is he liked jokes in titles. So nuclear war with the Ruskies, the Soviet Don, and he's, you can just hear the voice of Slim Pickens, in the Dr. Strangelove.
Dr. Strangelove. You're looking for the name of the movie.
So the joke title for this Ukrainian Crisis game was Putin it to ya. And plus the abuse of the Cyrillic all the time. This is one pet peeve of mine, folks. Do not do this. If you're a designer or a publisher, that thing that looks like a backward R, that's ya. That's a vowel. It's the word I just by itself. Ya, I. Okay. The thing that looks like an A, a capital A, that's a D. That's a capital D in printing. It's totally different in cursive. So don't use that as an A. You're looking stupid. You're looking silly. Don't abuse the Cyrillic. I mean, I'm pissed off at the Russians. I hate the Russians now, but protect the Cyrillic. Don't be stupid. Anyway, so I have this Ukrainian Crisis prototype, Putin it to ya, which is like just this weird find that I got. Someone was selling 2 Victory Point games that it was a bundle. And it just happened to be not an actual published one. It was a pre-production copy that got yanked from them and went to Hollandspiele. And I was like, wow, this is a cool thing. So that's probably one of my favorite cool Grail items.
That's pretty cool.
Some of the other ones are games that I've got from particular people. So one is from Ardwulf himself. You sold me your copy of Richard Berg's Dynasty from Hollandspiele. And that was like, I could not find it anywhere. And of course, that OCD was like, there's a hole. I'm missing a game. And Ardwulf sold it to me. And he actually asked too little. I said, no, Artie, I can't send you that. I'm going to send you more.
Mike is a gentleman and a scholar and a terrible businessman. So
yeah, I just and so like I have a game from Mark Ruggiero in the auction for selling off his estate legacy. I bought his copy of Decision Games Advanced ETO, which
big change.
I bid high. And I wanted it, and so they got some good money. I didn't bid as high as some of the prices that were out there, like Noble Knight Games, but
Yes, I am fully aware of what they want for it.
They did get a good amount there. So I like, having a couple of these games from people like that. There were memories attached to them and things like that. So those are the various aspects of Grail games for me.
I have Mark sent me well before he passed. Sent me his copy, or one of his copies, I guess I should say, of Ancient Roman. I remember the GDW original title, Eagles, and the designer, Lauren Wiseman, Caesar's Legions, Avalon Hill game. Mark sent me one of his, so I'm not getting rid of that, obviously. Do you have any particular, like, signed copies or autographs in the gaming collection that you... I don't really do autographs, but I have managed to accumulate a couple by accident.
I may, and I don't really remember. So that's not one of the ones that I remember. Like, oh, here I want to display this. Yeah, because I'm not into collecting autographs or things like that. But I actually may have something that was signed. But yeah.
I've got, I think, 3 signed things, and 2 of them are maybe 4. But if so, there's only one that isn't Mark Miller, the original designer of Traveler, for anybody who has managed to miss that so far. And I have nothing signed to the best of my recollection for Wargames at all. But I do have this is the closest thing I have to some of the rarity prototypes you're talking about. I've got the pre-pressed like proof copy and spiral bound. This is how it came, of a M.A.R. Barker book signed by M.A.R. Barker, who is no longer in favor, and Bob Alberti, who co-wrote the book with Barker, and that's like there were like 30 of them, and they're all numbered, and that is I have no idea what that would go for, to be honest. I've never seen one for sale. No idea. It could be the most valuable thing in this basement for all I know, and that's right over my shoulder. So,
yeah, some things are like, to the right person, it's really, really collectible, and other time they're so niche that it seems like it's really collectible, but could you really find someone that would pay for that ultra rarity? I mean, I know for a while that some of the Tekkamul materials were just out of print for so long and so expensive, like
very hard to find.
Mitlaniel, I always mispronounce it.
Mitlaniel, that's the pre-proof game I have. It was released by I forget who released it, but in a 2-volume set, which I also have.
2-volume set, and those were just like so crazy hard to find. And people were asking ridiculous prices on eBay. And, there was one of them that's like, oh my God, this guy wants $400. And I hate when someone has make an offer. I hate lowballing people. But one time I went to a guy and says, I don't think it's ever going to sell at that price. I'm going to offer you 80 instead of 400. And he took it.
That is a lowball price, but if you've looked at it, and you do, then sometimes people need the cash, and that's why they're selling the stuff. I hope that's not the case, but I'm not asking either. So
I looked on, the eBay history.
Right, you're doing the research to get a sense of what it should go for.
At all, and so even though there had been a couple of these really, really high-priced ones for a long time, it's like none of them are selling. So, what I would have gone up to 120. So I was figuring out like my bargaining position and what my cap. Normally, I hate spending anything more than 100 for the vast majority of things. And of course, there are exceptions for the Grail items. Some stuff just, you want a copy of Axis Empire's Ultimate Edition? You're gonna pay through the nose. You want a copy of Advanced Advanced PTO, easy to get under 100.
Yep.
But
Yep. And at most 100, 125.
Right. So, yeah.
I think I paid out of pocket for advanced PTO, and it was about 125, opened but unpunched from Noble Knight. So ETO, completely different story. That's a sick. $500 is a good price, and it could go for $750.
Yeah, I can't pay that much. I'll never pay. I can't ever see paying that much for a game, no matter how much I think I want it. The most I paid was for that Legrand Gare, and also it was I think it was about 300 with the shipping. And to me, that was just like, I felt bad about spending that much money, but I'd been looking for so long, and I did it.
I have you beat on that one score, because this was probably 5 years ago now. Second front. I want to say the price was from Noble Knight, and I knew what I was doing. Could I have gotten it cheaper? I could have. $465, I think, was the price for that. Unpunched. And I was obviously got meticulously checked the minute I walked it in the door, just to make sure everything was, because that's why I bought it from Noble Knight, because I knew if there was a problem, they'd fix it.
Well, that's somehow the thing. Yeah, that there's certain advantage of Noble Knight, and the free shipping if you buy enough, and being able to work with them if there's a problem. I bought a copy of Europa, was it Second Front? From someone on Board Game Geek, and it came incomplete.
Oof.
It was like all or most of the counter sheets were missing, and I contacted them. Say, "Oh, oops!" And they looked and they found them and they sent them to me, and that worked out okay. And the thing is, it was a pretty reasonable price. And I was thinking, did they selling it because they're missing the counter sheets and they just didn't tell anybody? That was my worry, right? I'm going to get someone who's like, well, it is what it is. And, of course, I would easily be able to win that fight, having paid through PayPal, and the fact that it wasn't complete and all that stuff and the rules.
Sorry, buddy, you lose.
But that one worked out because they found it and they shipped it. And it was like, whew. And it was from Europe, too. It was like someone in France. So they ate that second, shipment of the counters. But some things are not very expensive shipping from France if they can ship it in those document packs. So like that new company, I can't remember if it is it Esia's Edizioni, that they ship their latest games with the boxes unfolded. You have to put the box together, but they do it all as a document pack, and I love it. I actually featured that on the different kind of unboxing. We're actually we're boxing it. Yeah, it was.
I need to watch that video, actually. So Frank, thanks for stopping by.
There's Frank.
I had another question. We have like a couple minutes here, folks. But yes, this is somebody noticed. This is in the original shrink wrap. It's one of the 3 of these that I have.
Wow.
So, and I got that in a Traveler lot at an Origins auction at some point in the mid 90s, probably late 90s. Would have been late 90s, early 2000s, and obviously that's not going anywhere. I was relieved. I want to shout out to Mongoose Publishing, because for the 25th anniversary or the 50th anniversary, I was going to do an unboxing of this. Take the shrink wrap off and everything. I've had this thing for 25 years in the shrink wrap. And Mongoose got a copy from Mark that's in the shrink wrap, and they're going to do an unboxing. So I'm like, thank God, I don't have to do that.
I have a shrink copy of Mark Herman's John Carter of Mars from SPI, and it's like, I actually want to get out there and start doing comparative game. I want to look at the combat system, and there are things that I remembered about. And one of the things, I'm working on this series of ways of thinking in Wargame, and I'm writing scripts for a couple of different episodes, and one of them is going to be about game systems that have fluff and cruft in them, And that's one of them. There is a part of the dueling system where there's certain maneuvers that are worthless to you. You should never pick them because it's suboptimal. And one of the things I want to do is compare games that have systems like that, but where you can have different levels of skill for people, where you say, here's the cards you have available. And like, what maneuvers do you know? And so having that maneuvers that are suboptimal would be fine if you are a beginner swordsman and you can do these maneuvers here, but you don't really know this maneuver, or this maneuver might cost you something more until you're better skilled. And so the truly efficient swordsman would use these maneuvers and never these. But like, when could your game system actually benefit from having these suboptimal things that you could really say, just take this out and only use this part of the system? But you can actually make it of use for like a differentiation between skill levels. So
at the risk of dragging us out for a couple extra minutes, go ahead and finish what you're saying.
If I can find a cheap copy out there of a complete copy of John Carter of Mars SPI by Mark Herman, if someone wants to sell me a cheap copy, then I don't have to open my shrink one and I can do my study and exploration with that. So
I want to say I paid in the high two figures for mine. It might have been slightly over that, to be fair. It wasn't crazy, but it was not incredibly inexpensive, and you may not have mine.
No, that's
so. Do you have a copy of a game called Lace and Steel? It is an RPG, I believe an Australian RPG from the mid to late 80s by Paul Kidd.
So the answer is probably not.
It has a very interesting card-based dueling system in it, decades ahead of its time for RPGs.
I've picked up many different role-playing titles over the years, again, for like learning the system. I created a role-playing game back in high school that I'd like to get back to someday. And I have so much role-playing material, but it is not tracked. Using RPG Geek is just like so wimpier compared to BGG.
Yes, it is.
Wargame Geek using its database is so much easier than RPG Geek. I think we're done to their RPG Geek. Anyway.
Yeah, well, I know I have experienced the same problem. It's very difficult to find product on, and part of that is I think RPGs are messier than war games are. War games, I've been able to, I've got exceptions and special cases and SPI flats and other miscellaneous crap that doesn't fit anywhere else. But war game publishers, normally I could just say, okay, here's a game or a series of games. It's from this publisher. I will put it either with the series or with the publisher or with the period. Or it's not that complicated for the most part, right? RPGs are just a mess. I tried to build an RPG database, and I am not a database programmer. And it's very difficult to kind of figure out an organizational structure to accommodate everything in that database.
So the only thing that's kind of close in the war game world to that RPG mess is like Advanced Squad Leader and the add-on, the critical hit stuff, the Advanced Tobruk system. Is that really, it's not really ASL compatible, but it is if you just care about the maps or, converting the scenarios, and how do you keep track of that? And I'm a person
I just call all that. I would just, if I have zero third-party ASL product, you're right though. That is a I think less so than in RPGs, but it's kind of the same idea. I would unhesitatingly just shelve that with the ASL stuff. And you don't ask those people that buy that stuff that question because they probably only have ASL.
Yeah.
So it's just all their games, and it's all ASL.
I like getting those oddball third-party things, mostly for the maps, right? It's like, if I'm going to start digging in, playing a lot of ASL, it's going to be the core stuff, the historical modules that they've done, and less likely getting around to third-party historical stuff, except if I want to make my own scenarios and leverage these maps. And I've also used, for role-playing games, I've used the original Squad Leader maps and Advanced Squad Leader maps and put them together for overland traveling and exploring. And here's a goblin village or something, or the elf forest. And I love using maps from games from different purposes, right? So like the Cry Havoc series, using for like the fantasy trip, Wizards Melee and that scale. Like, this is fun for those. I'll mix and match games in their maps and use them for other purposes.
I'll tell you what, that new edition of the fantasy trip, even just the regular box, not much less the whole works thing, we're honestly worth it just for all the stand-ups and hex tiles and just all the play aids in that thing. Is absolutely off the hook.
That was definitely a Kickstarter that was worth doing for me. I couldn't keep up. They kept coming out with way too many things. Like, oh, no, this is a rabbit hole I don't want to go down. And especially when the pandemic hit and I stopped playing role-playing games at that point. And it was until we played Rubicrest, that was the first role-playing I'd done since the pandemic. I couldn't get into it. And so I stopped rabbit holing. I would still buy, thing here and there. I can't help myself, but not to the extent that I was doing.
Well, you're on the hook, by which I mean you will be invited. You don't have to say yes to whatever next RPG thing that I end up doing, which will happen when, who knows. So I'm restructuring my personal calendar. So, all right, folks, we are a few minutes over, so I want to thank everybody for stopping by tonight. And Mike, thanks so much for doing this. I really appreciate it. If you have not yet checked out Meandering Mike's Man Cave of Madness, go check it out. I thought I had just watched one of yours, and it should be in history, and I can't friggin' find it. I don't know. Hold on. I can do it this way. I had it in the chat at the beginning of the show. I will throw a link to Mike's YouTube channel in the video description, or in the chat, I should say. Yeah. So I almost said it like a robot. So Mike, once again, thanks so much for doing this with us tonight. Everybody else, have a great rest of the night. We will be back next Sunday, hopefully with Mr. Dan.
Can I say one thing, Vinyl?
Sure.
Remember, folks, take care of your games, and they should take care of you.
That's true. Good advice.